Very good. Shalom Aleichem.
Aleichem shalom to you.
Thank you so much for having me here today. Um, you know, uh, Last time, and that was actually the first time we met, was in Manhattan when I was waiting for the bus from Manhattan back to Monsey,
Right.
and I saw you. I said, "Hey, wait a minute, this is Gedalia. Gedalia, the folk rabbi. Is that how you call yourself?"
They call me the folk rock rabbi, yeah.
Wow. So, how did that come to be?
Folk rock rabbi is interesting. My father-in-law actually was calling me his rock and roll rabbi son-in-law for years. But then I saw, there's a Avram Rosenblum from the Asbury Yeshiva. It's called the Rock Rabbi. So I didn't want to step on his territory at all. So I thought, really my music's more folky anyway. So I started using folk rock rabbi. And it's interesting because the process of just marketing and trying to get my music out, the branding was always something was difficult for me to really kind of get a grasp on. And when folk rock rabbi, started being used, and I spoke to people about it, it started to kind of help me focus in on everything from my promotional stuff and marketing and branding. It seemed to capture the music and also the seriousness, the spiritual aspect, a lot of things. Everything seemed to fall into place there.
Are you a rabbi?
That's my smicha right there.
From where? From
Kol Yaakov Torah Center. From must be almost about 20 years ago already. What is it? No. Yeah, what is it? Into 2000. Yeah, that's almost over 20 years.
where were you born?
Where was I born? I was born in Brooklyn, New York,
What year?
1969.
Okay, tell me your age.
Now I'm 53.
53. Okay. So, did you grow up religious?
I did not grow up religious. We grew up very traditional. We had Passover Seders with the family, and we did fast on Yom Kippur. We did keep kosher in the home to some degree. There was no Sabbath observance growing up. I didn't keep Sabbath. We didn't, the sukkahs, certain things we didn't build a sukkah. The traditional holidays that people keep. It could be we did a little bit more than other, secular people. But I went to public school. I didn't really have any Torah education until I on my own started to.
Your parents are American?
Yeah, they're both my father, Halav Shalom, he was born in America. His great-grandfather was a rabbi in Zlochev, actually. And he remembers when his grandfather came to America, and his grandfather sent him to Crown Heights Yeshiva, in fact, when he was not even able to. He said he used to get hit with a ruler on the hand every day because he didn't read, and he would go home and they would give him like a ham and cheese sandwich for lunch. That's how the parents were not religious. So, but his grandfather wanted him to be religious, so he sent him to this yeshiva, and he didn't have a good experience there. He used to tell me that he would visit his grandfather and he would take down these big books from the shelf and point and say, read. And that he had terrible memories of that.
So that was it.
That was it for him. On my mother's side, she only spoke Yiddish when she was a little girl. My grandmother lived with us. Her mother, for years, only spoke Yiddish. I didn't really have such a connection with her. I should have learned Yiddish back then. But we spoke like a broken English, And she was not religious growing up either. They must have came from Europe. Her mother, they did come over from Poland. And the father, I think, left. So they didn't have their father growing up. And a younger sister also passed away. Then my mother's brother became religious during the war. And he raised a family on the Lower East Side. I still have to, I have many cousins, Ger Hasidim. They're all from from the Grape family, from my mother's brother, Charlie.
What does that mean? He became religious during the war.
I don't know so much about his story, but I know that he saw a lot of terrible things during the war, and I guess he was the oldest. It could be he had a little bit of a connection with with before they came to America, and that stuck with him. But he used to have care packages, sent in with kosher food, and then when he came back from the war, he became Orthodox, became religious, and was on the Lower East Side. He got married, had a difficult life. His wife passed away when the children were very young. He raised 3 boys and 2 girls by himself, selling ties. I think he was a tie salesman. And
your grandmother was religious?
My grandmother, growing up, if she was, it was very secretive, because she was always really, she had her own room and she lived with us in the house, and she wasn't a very active person, quiet, very quiet. She did have some Yiddishkeit, some Judaism with her, because I remember that. It's funny how I remember things. That when I remember one time when I was in public school, and we were in the car. I must have said something that was not nice. I don't remember what it was, but she called me a bad Jew, and I thought to myself, so, what? All right. What did we? I had no relationship with being Jewish anyway. What is it? Is that different than being just a bad person? But I remember that. So there must have been something that she did recognize. There's a certain behavior or way that a Jew is supposed to act that she was not seeing in me. And that stuck in my head for a long time. I don't know why.
So your parents were not interested in sending you to a yeshiva? They sent you to a public school?
Well, yeshiva was probably not even in their minds to send to a yeshiva, because it was such a different culture and a different life. They did send me to after-school Hebrew school, and to prepare for a bar mitzvah. I did have a bar mitzvah. It was usually in a conservative shul. They had Hebrew classes, and I was a troublemaker in these. I really was not. I don't know. I didn't enjoy it so much. I wasn't interested. It wasn't learning. It was just, someone saying over, some Jewish facts, and I felt like it was after school. I'd rather be playing with my friends. It was not such a... but I did it, and we had a bar. Actually, I have a twin sister. My twin sister lives in Florida, and we had a bar and bas mitzvah together.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Nice stuff. So we're in Brooklyn.
I was born in Brighton Beach in 1969. We lived in Beach Haven in an apartment building. Then we moved to East 4th and Avenue X.
How old were you?
When I was going to PS 216. I must have been in 3rd, 4th grade, something like that. And in Beach Haven, I remember we were robbed one time. That was also an event that sticks in my mind. We were playing outside in the summer. Everyone's running and jumping through the sprinklers, and I went upstairs to get a drink, and the key wouldn't go in the door. I came back downstairs. I told my parents that it's stuck. I don't know if they thought anything was wrong, but we all went back upstairs, and my father saw that there was something stuffed in the door. So my mother banged on the door. This is the police, my father finally got in and saw that the window was open, the fire escape. They took our television and my mother's wedding ring and money and all this. So that was the only. I remember that. I remember a friend of mine. How we used to play Batman and Robin together. Those are the 2 things I remember from back then.
Did you stay? Did you move?
Then we moved from there to East 4th and Avenue X. And then when I was in PS 216, I think I was in 5th grade, we moved again to Long Island, to Massapequa, Long Island. My father was a traveling salesman, and he got a job selling fabrics, textiles. He did a lot of things before that. He had drove a cab. He sold he had a women's clothing store. He had also a store. He used to sell tools, equipment for Eastern Fasteners, and then he was a salesman for a fabric company.
And your mother?
My mother was not working when we were young. She was always with us. She did start working later on, though. After there was a divorce and other things that maybe we'll get into when we lived in Florida and a few other things. But Long Island was a short stay also. We were there for about maybe 2 or 3 years and went to Schwarting Middle School, I think. And then my father was transferred to Florida.
How many siblings do you have?
I have a twin sister and a younger sister.
You're the
Twin
only-
is not religious, and the younger one is.
You're the only boy.
Only boy, yeah. Oldest boy.
So growing up, you were not into really Yiddishkeit.
Growing up, I was very not interested in religion at all. I mean, it was exactly like when I speak with my friends now that are, secular and not religious at all, that they look at religion as being something that's completely outdated and something that's they don't want any connection with at all. So I was probably worse than them even.
What were you interested in?
Well, I mean, I was always a very introspective person. I wasn't into sports. My father really wanted me to play sports, but I wasn't interested in it. Team sports, I should say. When I started bodybuilding, I was really into bodybuilding for years, and it was an individualized type of thing that I could kind of be in my own world and work on developing something, and I was interested in that. But regular sports, I was on a baseball team, on a football team, on a soccer team. I played all these sports because my parents wanted me to. Never was interested in sports. I was writing poetry a lot. I mean, since I was very young. When I was in school, I remember we would have competitions for poetry, and I would write. All my friends would ask me to write their poems also, and then it would be like the top 10 poems would all be from me with different names on them. So I was really into poetry, and I did do a little. I didn't really enjoy acting, but my mother was very much a part of the PTA and the school plays and everything. So she used to always want me to be in the plays. So I did a little of that. And otherwise, I had friends. We played. We got into a lot of mischief. I was more, just looking to have fun with my friends. I wasn't really so motivated to do anything, develop anything like as far as like when my friends worked. I wasn't a big working type of person to get a job, and I would rather almost, just write my poetry and do my own thing. If I didn't have money to do something, I wouldn't do it. I wasn't so motivated to get a car and everything like my friends were when I was a teen.
So when did you begin doing music?
Music, believe it or not, I did not touch a piano till I was about 18 or 19 years old. When I was very young, I remember my father wanted me to play trumpet. The first experience I had with music was a trumpet. And I played that, and I managed to get, up to like one of the first 3 chairs in trumpet in PS216 when I was there. But it didn't last long. I didn't really enjoy it so much. I never felt that I got to a point of really like self-expression through it. It was just, learning the notes and trying to do the melodies properly. After trumpets, we had a close friend of the family that was a major drummer that had played on some gold records, like some serious songs, and he got me a drum pad and a pair of drumsticks. I was going to try to play drums, but I didn't get a teacher, and I really didn't enjoy just playing on the drum pad 1 and 2. It was just it was boring. So I didn't do that. I tried to play guitar, I think, when I was very young. Piano, even maybe tried a couple of times. Never took lessons for anything. And didn't really think about music from probably that age, around 11 or 12, until I was around 19.
What happened?
Well, when I was 19, I remember I was living in Florida, finished high school. I was supposed to go in the army, but it didn't work out, and I'm happy about that. Then I started working in a movie theater, and I was managing a theater, and I was also very into bodybuilding, and then I got my massage therapy license. I was in school for that. Started working with some chiropractors in Florida, developing a little clientele for that. But always writing, and I used to love going down to the beach. I mean, when it was early in the morning or late at night, and I would sit there and I would write, and I'd listen on my headphones to the songs I liked. I was very into classic rock. It was a big, like a little bit of a heavy metal stage too at one point. And I think a combination of hearing music and the feeling that it gave me and the way it uplifted me and took me out of my, you know, whatever was holding me back and feeling like I couldn't break free. It just made me feel free. That and the idea of wanting to express my own messages, my own thoughts, I think I decided to then try to put my poems to music. So my mother got me this piano. I remember there was an old building that burned down. There was a beat up piano. I don't remember how it came about, but all I know is I was living with my father in Fort Lauderdale, and one day I just got a piano and we moved it in. It wasn't even in key, and I didn't even think about tuning it. I just started banging away at the keys and trying to figure out. I didn't even know how to write a song. I didn't even know how to play anything. But I thought, oh, you know what? I have to think of like a note for each word. So I first started just trying to make a melody with the poem. And then I started realizing, that there's such a thing as a chord. So the way that I learned chords was very interesting. I wrote a chord book. It was hundreds of pages. I remember I sat down and I had a regular chord book too that I was looking at. But every chord that I would play, I would write it down, and then I would try to find out what the next chord would be that could sound good after this one. And started writing, chords and chord progressions. And then I would just sit there with just my right hand even and play the same chord over and over. And I would just try to start singing the poem into the chord, seeing where it would go. And when I felt that it was getting it needed a change, I would search for the next chord. And sometimes it would be the right chord, sometimes it would be way off. But that's how I kind of really started teaching myself. I never took any lessons to this day.
What did you write about?
It was always, the poems I wrote were never superficial ideas, love poems. I really didn't write love poems. It's interesting. I always wrote poems that were kind of introspective writings, kind of like letting my mind kind of take me where it was going. But I would have an idea. I remember when my grandfather passed away, a vision of me sitting on his knee, I remember, came into my head. So I started off, I remember sitting on his knee. And then I would go through a story of how, and trying to rhyme the words, what the experience was like, and how he's not here anymore. And I forgot the name of the poem, but I was always writing, things that were going on in my life or things that I found interesting in the world.
You mentioned classic rock. What were some of the names of the bands that you listened to?
Well, it's interesting. I can't say that I really like a specific artists or bands. I've always kind of gone by the song. So I remember Baker Street when I was growing up in the 70s. I liked the sax part on that. I remember, Rocket Man from Elton John was a song that really hit me. I remember. In fact, I remember the song that I remember standing in. We moved to Florida, and I was getting a job in a movie theater. My first job, my mother took me. I think I was 12 or 13 years old, and I heard Elton John, Rocket Man, come on the radio in the movie theater. And for some reason, it was a very nostalgic moment. It kind of brought Brooklyn and New York into Florida with me, and I felt like it gave me a certain amount of comfort when I heard that song, and it was an interesting experience. I remember to this day hearing it, and I was into Elton John, and in fact, my piano playing, even though I'm nowhere near a pianist like he is, my piano playing itself was is very much has his rhythmic type of feel to it. Yeah, so Elton John was one. I remember when I lived in Long Island, I had a friend really into Billy Joel. I wasn't so into Billy Joel back then, but then, because I took up piano, I guess, I got into a few of his songs. Again, I didn't like all of his songs. I didn't like all of Elton John's songs. It depends, on the Stranger album. I think there was what was it? With Moving Out, a few of the Phil Ramone productions that he did, I really was moved by. In fact, I remember listening to the Stranger, or was it not Glass Houses also. That it was really one of those albums that took me out of this world and really like elevated me a lot. So that was the feeling I was looking for, and that was the feeling. It is the feeling that I want to give others. Except I'm trying to add a lyrical some type of message that can be beneficial to a positive future in the music itself. So Elton John, Billy Joel, a lot of other classic rock bands. I was into hard rock for a while, AC/DC and Ozzy Osbourne, and in Florida some southern rock, Leonard Skinner, and Alabama some other bands, songs here and there.
Would you say you were part of the 60s? Did the 60s affected any of your life?
I've never been a hippie. I was never a hippie type of person. Not that I have. I didn't choose or not choose to be one. It just wasn't my personality. I was never. I was a little bit more concerned with maybe my dress, what clothes I wore, and a little bit of style. I was a little more stylish than that. I guess I was more interested in looking cool so much than just being overly laid back. I guess I had a little bit of. I wasn't, I wasn't like into drugs and like some of my friends were. I'd maybe smoke pot once in a while. If I smoked a cigarette, I have asthma, so I never was really able to smoke. But it was just here and there, drinking beers in high school, and having fun going out and partying with the friends. And for sure had my experience of hangovers, but nothing, it wasn't a huge part of my life.
Hmm. So, what was the next step? What did you do with your poems, with your songs? Did you make tapes?
I didn't record for a long time. When I was living in New York, when I first came, I guess when I was around 20 or 21, I left Florida with my first demo tape. I didn't get into how I wrote that. I guess it was after about a year or two of writing poems and putting them to music that I decided, let me take a few songs and try to see if I can do something with my music and make it in New York City, go to the Big Apple and become a big famous musician. Sorry. No big deal. Okay. So I went in the studio. I thought that I had 3 songs, but really I had none. The songs were not songs at all. But the studio I went to, the producer there took what I did have, and we made a little bit of a deal because he knew I was going to come to New York, and he said, you know what, let's go 50-50. I'll do the music. I like your words, and we'll put something together, and you can go and shop it around and see what happens. So I put together a little demo, just 3 songs, and it was cassette tapes back then. I probably made a couple of hundred copies, and I had this Cadillac Coupe de Ville that I got from one of my an older lady that was a massage client of mine. That was she couldn't drive anymore. She had this old Cadillac, and she gave it to me for I think a few $1,000s. It was in perfect condition. I packed up everything and took these tapes, and I drove to New York. Just left one day, drove through the night, got to New York. My father was living there at the time and had a little studio apartment in Queens that I moved in with him, which was a whole other story. How our relationship, we really didn't have one before that, and it was an interesting experience. So I got to New York with these tapes, and I just got up one day took a briefcase with tapes in it, and I took a map of Manhattan and an appointment book, and I went down to the South Street Seaport, to the lowest part of Manhattan I could find, and I just started walking up all the way from the east side. I didn't even know where I was going, but any building that had anything to do with music, I went and knocked on a door. And I talked, and some people said, well, we don't even accept these. Sometimes I met someone that said, oh, okay, we'll take a listen to it. I kept all my notes. I wish I still had that book. It was thousands of connections. But the music industry changes so fast, it probably wouldn't be worth anything today anyway. But I went and threw out hundreds and hundreds of submissions of cassettes. Nothing happened. I even got to the head of Polygram Records at one point, and I was sitting on the other side of his desk, and he took out my cassette and he put it in the machine, and he listened for about 10 seconds, and then he turned it off, and then he's pointed to the corner. He said, "You see that pile over there?" There was a pile of cassettes up to the ceiling. He just threw it over there.
I'm sorry.
So, but it was fun. That didn't work out. And but at that point, instead of coming back to Florida, I decided, you know what? If I really want to give music a shot, I got to try to stick it out. So I had my piano shipped up to New York, which is another story. In fact, that was paid for by a friend of mine. I joined the Songwriters Guild of New York, and they had these workshops every Wednesday night where you come and play your songs. And I met someone there, a friend of mine, Clifton, and he loved one of my songs called "The Beat Goes On." I think it was something, I forgot the name. It was all about my driving up to New York to make it be a big success, and it was a very nice lyric. And he said, "You got to finish this song." I said, "I have no piano." He said, "I'm going to pay to have your piano shipped up from Florida." So he got it shipped up for me, and I moved it into my father's apartment. And at that point, I think I decided that I couldn't even play and sing together at the same time. I couldn't sing in key. I couldn't perform at all. But I said, you know what? If I want to make it, I've got to try to be able to perform my own songs so that I could show them to people. Still thinking I was going to be a writer. I wasn't thinking of being a performer at all. And I sat down by the piano, I think, at least 10 hours a day for 2 years, every second of the day, until I wrote "If I Were Superman" in 1991. And when I wrote that song, my father was sitting there actually, and he said, "That's a hit." He really liked it. And then I decided, you know what, I'm going to start going to open mics in the city. I was able to at least play chords and sing along now. Not in pitch yet, but I was able to at least get by, and so I felt confident. Started going to open mics, and then I got a job at a health club, and I was doing massage therapy also with some personal clients to make a few dollars here and there. And every night I was in the village, writing and going to the open mics, and really trying to, I wasn't really a part of the music scene so much. I still felt a little different than everyone. Don't know what it was, but I was much more introspective, and I wasn't really looking to get involved in this big scene that was going on. I felt it was very distracting to me. So I would sit in coffee shops and I would write. Then I would go to open mics and play. Sometimes I didn't even have enough money to get back to Queens from the city. I mean, I was really, so it was tough times a little bit. And but I kept doing it over and over, and I get thinking about 1993 was my first full performance. From 91 to 93, I was writing, doing open mics. By then, I accumulated a good, I must have written about 200 songs during that time at least. But out of those 200 songs, maybe 15 of them were worth performing. And then I started playing at the Bitter End and the Speakeasy and um, the Sun Mountain Cafe. I had like a regular Sunday gig there, and I was working on developing that. And
You played piano well at that time already?
but I can't say that I ever played piano well. I mean, but I was able to accompany myself like a singer songwriter. I wish I would have picked up a guitar, I'll tell you the truth, from the beginning, because, for one, it's a big schlep taking my keyboards into the city, for shows. Guitar would be so much easier.
At that time, you would take a keyboard with you?
Yeah, I'd have to go into the subways with my keyboard and on a cart, and it was heavy. And also, I feel like an acoustic guitar can give a lot more of can fill in the sound a little bit nicer for my songs now that I use the guitar. That it would have been nicer to be able to become a better guitar player. That I unfortunately don't have the time today to really focus on an instrument like that. I'm writing and I'm practicing, but whatever. But thank God everything's. I'm happy with the way that it's turned out.
I was in a local supermarket the other day and I heard a song and I recognized the voice.
Right.
It was your song playing at the store.
Yeah. Maybe you told me that. It's so interesting.
What was that song? You said something that you composed it for.
I thought it was Generation to Generation, if that was the song. In 1995, this is already going into when I started my spiritual journey already. Because in like 94, I wrote a song, or 93, I wrote a song, Needle and Thread. And I was very sick with bronchitis. I was sharing a studio apartment with a good friend of mine at that time. And it was a song about how our souls are all connected. And it was the beginning of my own spiritual journey that I started becoming very interested in my relationship with God and becoming closer to God and trying to be able to derive um, more of a sense of closeness. And I wrote that song, and that began really my spiritual journey. But I started looking into going to classes to learn a little bit more. And then there was a trip that came up that was going to Poland and Israel to visit the concentration camps and then go to Israel. And so I decided that I was going to take that trip. And my lease was up in my apartment. I sold everything I had and went on a one-way ticket to Israel on this trip, an open-ended ticket. And when I was there, after the trip was over, I decided to stay even longer. And I met Rabbi Noach Weinberg from Aisha Torah, Olav Shalom, and he became a big influence on me. In fact, we used to learn together privately in his office twice a week. It was a big, everyone was amazed at that because he was, someone you could have private time with was a big thing. And while I was learning with him, they had this fundraising event coming up. And I knew that he was from the Lower East Side also, and I wrote this song, Generation, Generation, that was about a kid growing up from the Lower East Side with traditions and about sharing those traditions and trying to perpetuate Judaism to the next generation. And I wrote this song, and I took my keyboard and I knocked on his door one day in his office, and I put it up against his desk and gave him the words, and I said, "You got to hear this song." I sat down, I played it for him, and on the spot, he said, "I want you to record that, and we're going to put it on the tape, and we're going to give it out at this big gala dinner event, and I want you to perform it at the event." So it was a major event in fundraising in Israel, and a lot of the top, they had donors from some of the big people in Israel in politics and in other fields and everything, and so we made that tape, and then that tape was distributed but it was never officially released. I didn't release it. I don't even know what happened to it. But through the years, it's very interesting. I was watching, in fact, my sister called me from Florida a couple of years ago. She said she was watching watching something, and when the credits were rolling, all of a sudden a video of me came on playing Generation to Generation. That I did in a shul maybe 20 years, for some shul 20 years ago, and they were trying to have a little clip for their promo.
Wow.
And so again, once in a while, the song pops up. I actually have in mind to re-record it and try to release it at some point. I just feel it needs a bridge. It needs something. I wasn't really, my songwriting at that point was not as developed as I would have liked, as it is now. And I would try to fix it up a little bit.
Wow, what a story. What began that journey? What happened? Your spiritual
My
journey.
spiritual journey? I think that, since I was a kid, lying in bed, I was always talking to God. Since I can't remember a moment when I wasn't 6, 7, 8, always, but not interested in religion at all. Just interested in, I guess, feeling that I had this intrinsic, internal connection that I knew there was only one God. And I just I never looked into other religions. I never had any searching as far, I always felt connected to God my whole life. And I think at a certain point, I wanted to start developing it stronger. I thought about certain like biblical figures like Abraham and Moses. I was thinking, how did they become so close with God? What did they do? How did they get close? And I started trying to look into what their journey was. What did they do to be able to achieve that? And that's when I actually remember speaking to my cousins on the Lower East Side that I mentioned in the beginning. I asked them, I said, they directed me to this one-on-one learning program in Lincoln Square Synagogue in Manhattan. I showed up one night with my long hair and earrings, and I met someone named Joey Greenblatt, who was very close with Shlomo Carlebach. And Joey Greenblatt said, I'll learn with you. He heard I was into music, and so we started learning from Breishis the beginning. I got into a really deep philosophical conversation that just already changed my entire outlook of what learning was. Because it was very different than factual learning. We were really going into deep concepts and ideas. And so we started learning once a week, and then I would go back to my regular life. Yeah, so we finished learning, and then I would go and back to my regular life. And then I remember as I kept learning more and more, I decided that I wanted to really pursue spirituality in a big way. I remember I did begin keeping Shabbos before I ever went to Israel. In fact, I remember that my friend Joey Greenblatt invited me to Long Beach to a Shabbos event, and I felt immediately just the energy and the holiness, the spiritual energy of Shabbos was so powerful that, even the few times I remember on Shabbos afterwards, we'd all maybe still go out to a club, to hear some music. And I just felt such a change from the Shabbos experience to going out that I was starting to really recognize what spirituality feels like. And then I actually decided I wasn't going to work on Shabbos anymore. At a certain point, I had a lot of my massage clients on Shabbos. And I had my own apartment back then. I was paying for a studio apartment. It was not so inexpensive. And I played a concert with my friend Seth Glass, who was a Shlomo Carlebach's guitar player for years. He asked me to sit in a Carlebach concert. And I met someone that was teaching gym at a yeshiva. Knew that I was into physical training. He said, I know another yeshiva that needs a gym teacher. So it was right around the corner from me. So I got the job. They hired me with long hair, and I was teaching gym in this yeshiva, and it exactly paid my rent. So I stopped, working on Shabbos, and I was continuing along, but I think my mind was already, ready for, some type of a change where I really wanted to move forward in spirituality. I did not begin learning seriously yet for a couple of years. It wouldn't be. But I did notice this trip to Israel and thought, hey, you know what? This is what I need to get away and really delve into spirituality and write some new songs that are deeper and going into these ideas. And this life experience would be a tremendous thing for me. So I got into this. I wrote an essay. I remember I had help from a friend and got a free trip to Poland and Israel. And off I went.
Who organized it?
It was through the Jerusalem Fellowships, which Aish Shatora, I believe, runs the Jerusalem Fellowships. It wasn't the March of the Living. It was a similar thing they did this year, that they went to the concentration camps, and then the concentration camps also were a huge impact on me. I mean, I remember just being inside the camp, and it was the strangest feeling, because outside in the street, I felt a lot of glares from people that were just not. They looked at me. I felt anti-Semitism in the air there, and I was in the concentration camp. I felt safer than outside of the camp one day, and I thought to myself, "Wow, this is a really strange experience. How could I feel safer in the camp?" And I almost felt like it was welcoming me there in a strange way, that I was connecting with the Jewish people in a way I never did. I grew up, if you read my first blog I wrote, I used to tell people I was Italian, because I didn't want to even say I was Jewish. I was very ashamed of being Jewish growing up. And there was a lot of anti-Semitism in public school. And for some reason in Poland was where I just started to develop more pride of being Jewish. In the place where the worst things happened to Jews, that's where I began to come closer. It was a very interesting experience.
So you went to Isha Torah. How long were you there?
So after Poland, we went to Israel. I was in the fundamentals program they started us with, which was very interesting, a lot of philosophical classes. I stayed in Isha Torah for about a year. The trip was over and I stayed on. So I was there for about a year. And then I came home for a break, and it was a very tough break. I mean, it was the first time I came back to America since I became religious. So now I'm wearing a yarmulke on my head. It's the old friends that I saw were like looking at me very strange.
Did you cut your hair?
My hair was cut already. Yeah, sure. I cut that in Israel a couple of times. It wasn't just one cut.
Was it your choice or?
No, it was my choice. Yeah, I was never even asked to cut my hair. Although, you know what happened? If you know Rabbi Schuster, Rabbi Meir Schuster, Zitzal, he's a book about him out. He used to stand by the Kosel, by the Western Wall, and he would go up to everyone that was looked Jewish and ask them if they were Jewish and set them up for Shabbos meals and bring them to Or Sameach or Eish Torah. And he was a big outreach person. So I was standing at the Western Wall one day, and I felt someone grab my ponytail and yank down on it. And I turned around very upset, and then I see an old yid there, this old man. He's smiling at me. Are you Jewish? And I became very close with him because he was close with Rabbi Noach Weinberg also. And then I ate in his house a few times. I was there for Passover a few times. So he didn't tell me to cut my hair. But whatever, then I started putting on tefillin, and I realized I needed to cut my hair a little bit so I could do the mitzvah of tefillin. But I didn't cut it all the way. I cut it so it was like shoulder length. And what happened was, I remember I got it cut like that. Then I was in yeshiva one day, and a rabbi came over to me and he says, "Oh, your hair looks so cute like that." That made me cut the rest of it off. So then I got rid of the rest.
So you came back. So what happened after the break?
Came back, and then that was a whole other time. I wanted to get back into music, but I wanted to try to do something with Jewish communities a little bit. So I did like like a flyer, and I sent it out, and I got some gigs going to like on all over Florida. I started performing, telling my story a little bit in shuls and doing like a uh, one man act type of thing. And then through the music, I think at that point I was getting older. I met someone that introduced me to a rabbi in Miami Beach. This Rabbi Gross, Alav Shalom. He was a big influence on me also. He was a Holocaust survivor. He wrote a book called Our Miraculous Survival. And I wrote the song A Knock at the Door based on his book. And then we used to travel to public schools, and he would speak, and I would play my song uh, talking about the Holocaust. And his family had an amazing experience, and his mother was a huge tzaddikus. I remember the book talks about the stories during the war with them. And he got me a job working in the Saxony Hotel with for the Berkowitz family. That were very nice to me. They gave me free room and board, and let me do massage therapy in the solarium in the top. And I worked there for the whole season, and I was also learning by Rabbi Zweig's yeshiva in Miami Beach. But I was getting older, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I kind of pulled myself out of the whole music scene in a big way, and I didn't know how how I would ever integrate that back. But I did want to continue writing and performing. But at that point, I think I decided, let me look into becoming a rabbi. And I thought maybe an outreach rabbi. I could use my music. I can do something with. And I met a rabbi in Miami Beach that sent me to Monsey, New York, to come and go through a rabbinical program, a 2-year program. I'm skipping a lot of things in between, but there was I was in Chicago, and I was in there. I traveled around quite a bit in the interim, and I also went back to Israel again for a short period of time, and then I came. But the short version is I got to Monsey, and I started a rabbinical program here
Where?
in Kol Yaakov. There's this, and it was a 2-year program by Rabbi Storch was the rabbi teaching the class. It was called I forgot what is it called. It was had a special name for the rabbinical program here. Um, but anyway, so I finished that, and I passed the test. During the smicha program itself, the rabbinical program, I got married, and my wife was she had a master's degree in gifted and talented education, and she was teaching, and she wanted me to stay and learn while we got married. So that's when I decided to look for another yeshiva that I can go to that was going to be serious learning yeshiva, and I went to a yeshiva here in Monsey that I learned in for about 10 years after that. And then I started teaching at Or Sameach, and
Which yeshiva did you learn?
I learned by Rav Shmuel Feivelson Zatzal. He was a base medrash. The Torah is he was Rabbi Aaron Cutler from Lakewoods, like his main talmud, his main student. And I learned a tremendous amount from him and from the yeshiva that really changed my life. I had to look at the words of the rabbis, had to look at the Talmud, and had to really learn. And then I put music aside for years. During that whole time by Rav Feivelson, I was not doing any music. I was so satisfied from the learning. It was filling me up so much and giving me everything I needed. I didn't even feel like I had a desire to write. It was just it was a different experience. And but I did try to write once in a while, but nothing would come out. And I'm writing actually a blog about this now, about what what I think writer's block really is, which is that sometimes a person needs more life experience and needs more to be able to express and identify some of the things going on within, that until you really have clarity on certain things, it's really hard to express it. And I think those 10 years when I was still integrating the Jewishness and my personality and everything coming together, I did not have clarity to express anything that was real to me at that moment yet. And then I wrote the song "Make Me a Sage" right in my closet over there. I had my keyboard in my closet because my whole room was filled with books, and I had my keyboard in the closet. And one day I came home from break and I sat down, and in like 10 minutes I wrote the song "Make Me a Sage." And something about that song told me that I was ready to get back into writing again. I was at a new place with a new message, and since then it's just been little by little getting back into music, learning about the new music industry, which is very different, learning how to use, going online and marketing and distributing and all of the jobs that an independent artist has to do nowadays. And that's where I'm at now. I'm writing and I'm recording and releasing songs and trying to express a good message in a time that really needs it, and to try to continue on my own to grow and aspire to good things.
Yes, beautiful, beautiful. You mentioned that when you came back from Asia Torah from Israel, you came back to America. You went to places. You shared your story. What was your message at that point? What did you tell people?
Well, I have a whole one-man show that was called Searching for Meaning. I can show you the flyers. I have to. I did some in Passaic. I was all over the country with it. And Searching for Meaning was basically taking my songs from my Superman song through the years, and I would play a song, and then there would be monologue that was speaking about where I was at that time in my life. And each song connected with that time. And I went through, and people saw my own spiritual journey through the song, and they also heard the messages and the ideas and thoughts and insights I had that I expressed during those times. But the main thing was really just to share with other people something real and sincere about. I have a diary I kept. Most of the comments people wrote were just thanking me for the sincerity and the honesty, and they really felt. They felt it, and they felt it was real, and they were able to identify within themselves the things that I spoke about.
And would you say same thing you're doing today?
No, I say it's now it's even developed more than that. I'm always trying to continue, to grow and not to. So now I think that it's not so much the searching for meaning anymore. I feel like it's like, I found the meaning, and now I'm sharing messages that I get from my learning, messages that I get from looking at the world and recognizing the way that I used to see things and how it was really not in my best interest, to the way that I see things now, and the way that I feel that how things could be better, but how do you really make a change when there's so much to do out there? So I'm really focusing on using the music and what I'm able to do to put into the world messages that have positive things to think about, and that also are maybe giving credence and giving some um, putting some weight on the side of striving to become better, and not just focusing on having more, becoming rich and more famous, and having this, and trying to get people's attention in a way that's destructive and not good for them. Trying to use music as a tool. That's what I think it is. It's a tool that could be used for a lot of good.
Mhm. And you also help other artists to record their music.
Well, I do have my nonprofit called the New Song USA. That it started off really just promoting. I still do. It promotes songs with good messages all over the world, just to get people to hear them and to share them and comment, and just to connect with people with a good message. Now, recently it developed into visiting prisons. I have a couple of prison concerts coming up to inspire the people, the inmates there, and hopefully help in their rehabilitation process a little bit. And I did put the word out a couple of times online looking for people to send me if they wrote a lyric or a song that they feel has a good message that could be beneficial for people, that I would also be interested in raising money through the organization to bring other people into the recording studio and to get them out there, get them recording some of their songs, maybe putting some playlists together of these good songs, and also trying to get artists in general to recognize how much power there is in music and in all arts to be able to put a good message out there in the world, because people are, there's givers and takers. That's all it boils down to. And if a person's going to start hearing and seeing things that are really making them feel that they want to do good and looking up to people that are doing good, I think that it could start to change the things that we do and gradually have a very big impact on the world around.
Beautiful. Rabbi Gedalia, thank you so much for meeting with me and sharing with us your story.
It's my pleasure, Yaakov. Thanks for coming. And I look forward to hearing some of your songs also. I know we'll get to share some more.
Thank you.